Good evening and welcome to the School Building Committee meeting of January 22nd, 2013. We're going to skip over approval of the minutes since we don't have a quorum present as of yet. And no correspondence, old business. Tilly, did you have a question for Carl about about the approvals for the planning board?
Yeah, when you come to the planning board, you had mentioned that some towns have you come to the planning board and others don't.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a specific reason for doing that and not doing it?
Well, it has to do with the interpretation of the so-called Dover Amendment as to what that means for public school projects.
Right.
And most towns ask their town council if they're unsure, and the feedback they get from town council is generally that the town has, let's say it the other way, schools and churches are allowed to go in any zoning area.
Right.
They're not precluded,
Right.
and the town can only impose quote-unquote reasonable dimensional requirements on the projects. And that's a more limited scope of review than most towns' site plan review process. Site plan review process gets into, traffic impacts or drainage impacts or character of the building and, is the dumpster shielded and, those kinds of impacts on abutters. Whereas the Dover Amendment says the town can only impose reasonable dimensional requirements, setbacks, height, location on the lot. And so in that sense, they feel a lot of towns, it's not, certainly not required to go through site plan review. Many do it as a courtesy. It's a big project.
Right.
So that's why some places do and some places don't.
I have a question along those lines. Oh, sorry, George.
Well, just that some of the issues you mentioned, like butter concerns, drainage, are involved in this project. So I imagine that's why you budgeted for going through the site plan review.
We
permit
talked
process.
early on saying if the planning board would like us, we would go before them. We're not lawyers, we're not interpreting the zoning code for you, but that's sort of how we put it. And so, yeah, if the planning board would like to meet with us, we'd like to meet with them.
My question on that is, I just don't want to see the project delayed, to be honest with you. So obviously, we want to have planning board, involved and everything. But by right, we don't necessarily have to go to planning board. So with that in mind, we want to make sure that we don't get stalled up in terms of timeline in the planning board, with the planning board. So the request would be, we're doing this and we want some input, but, it isn't the end-all be-all of approval, to be honest with you. Not that we want to disrespect the planning board at all. I mean, obviously, that's not the intent. But I don't want to see it get hung up at planning board for, and I'm not saying that they do that, but, the potential could be to maybe get hung up at planning board. Tilly, you have more experience than I do at that.
Well, it's usually not hung up on a site
Okay.
approval, but
All right.
it's really not even an approval because of the door.
Right,
Right.
right.
Yeah,
It's a review.
It's a review.
Okay.
It's
Right.
very general. Because of the size of it, personally, I would say come,
Oh, sure.
and another set of eyes to look at it. And like I had asked you about the cost for an engineer to look at it. Even our building inspector is not an engineer. Our planning board is not nobody there
Right.
is an engineer.
Yeah.
So that's usually the process. But in no way can the town prohibit it.
Right,
And it's
right.
definitely on our intensity of use where it's already allowed,
Mhm.
throughout any district. So that's all I wanted to clarify. Tomorrow we will talk about it at our meeting,
Okay.
planning board meeting, to see what the rest of them feel about it.
And I want to stress, I'm not saying that planning board holds things up. I just, that actually, please, planning board, you do a great job. It's just, I wouldn't want to see things,
We strive to get it done as quickly as possible,
Again, and
believe
that's
me.
not, I'm not being critical of the planning board by any means.
Yeah.
So is there a permit issued with a site plan review with conditions?
No, we would give that to the building inspector, and I guess you have to go to the Concom too.
Yep.
Right, so it would have to be that step as well as ours. And then and the building inspector would make a determination.
And I think Carl had mentioned that he was gonna go before all of these anyways.
I know- I thought he
regardless,
did
it was a
too, yeah.
courtesy, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's good. I mean, we
Yeah.
wanna make sure everyone is involved.
Yep.
What about the technical review agent?
Well, we're gonna talk about it tomorrow at our planning board meeting, and he had already agreed that if we request one, that they will take care of it, you know, and that we can get it. But I don't know what the rest of the board feels about, but it's on our agenda tomorrow.
Well,
Because,
So we have to pay for it,
So it's
yeah,
budgeted.
it's budget.
right,
Project.
yeah.
I think of all of the components and being on the planning board with you for so many years, I think of all of the components, the technical review of the stormwater management plan is really important to have an independent set of eyes. And there's nobody here, or there's nobody on the planning board, and I'm sure the architects, you know, engineers are gonna do it right. But for a project this size, I've just seen other jobs go before, that are town jobs, that skip the planning board process because they're town jobs, and problems happen because of it.
That's a good point.
So, I strongly recommend that this board, that your board, or however, gets my vote, that the technical review agent is required to review
Yeah.
these.
Mainly the road is the biggest concern, and the storm drains.
That's the-
But as it's being constructed now, who does the reviewing and inspecting as it's being developed as far as the road?
Well, there's, daily presence on the site by, Pat's
Pat
firm,
and-
but then there's testing of compaction and, other,
See, that's-
materials, concrete and steel in the project, but testing the compaction of the materials going under roads and buildings and landscape areas is, prescribed in part of the budget too.
And the architects and engineers don't disappear during construction. They come whenever it's necessary. Engineers will come up and review certain aspects of the job at, regular intervals during the course of the job,
Right.
during requisition time, do an inspection at the time. But again, they'll be doing inspections. We have a full-time person doing observations. There's a testing firm that will be doing all of the tests that are required by the engineers and the architect on compaction and steel and concrete. So there's quite a bit of overview. There's a commissioning person that's hired by MSB that comes out on a regular interval to look at certain things. None of them are involving site or drainage by the commissioning agent, but with regard to the building. So there's quite a few eyes involved
Yeah.
in the project.
So, to be clear, is there a notice of intent that's filed for a site plan review?
No.
No.
No, that's
So
part of
No,
the,
that's only Concom.
Yeah.
So there's no voted decision from the planning board?
No,
Or condition?
just, we would point out, conditions if we usually they're agreeable. We discuss what we think it should be, and then whatever the applicant, agrees to, we try to accommodate.
So
If he wants another way of doing something, we try to,
So they could be written on the
work-
plans, but are the plans filed at the registry? Or are these just internal?
not as
plans?
part of,
No
not as
requirements,
part of
yeah.
the site plan review.
Okay.
Conservation Commission,
Yeah.
order of conditions is, yeah.
I was concerned with the inspection. That was kind of, where does that go? I mean, you said somebody's there all the time. Now, I'm not concerned about the building, because I'm sure the building inspector will be part of that, but he does not do the roads. So that's where,
Well, again, like I said, under controlled construction by the code, when this project is done, the architect will be providing as much oversight they need to certify at the end of this job, provide an affidavit
Yeah.
that this job has been constructed per plans and specs. So they will be providing as much oversight as they think they need, in addition to whatever else we are supplying, the testing lab is supplying. They are compelled to make sure they are comfortable with the amount of effort they're putting in to make sure they can supply an affidavit that says this job is built per plan and specification, as required by the code.
right. And other projects that you've built elsewhere, they don't have another inspector representing the towns
No,
to do it.
no,
Oh, okay.
No.
That's what I wanted to
no.
So
connect.
how do you fill out that phase control construction form to tell you what you have to inspected everything, because that's usually gone over with the inspector of the town, just to make sure. The new one, you've seen the new state ones that just came out, right?
I haven't seen the form you're referring to, but I mean, generally, we do prescribe the testing program and share it with the building inspector before the job starts. It says these
And
are
sit with them and
how many
determine if there's
tests,
anything
you know,
else
we
that's needed or
determine.
whatever.
Right,
The structural certificates, that's part of the code requirements.
right.
That's presented by the structural engineer, the architect, the technical engineer, to the building department, that's part of it, because we get
So
that.
that's chapter 7, that's
Yes.
section 17, right?
Yeah,
Right.
we-
But
we use that as
there's a
part
new
of it.
one out, just to let you know. The state just put it out in December. And, it's
Okay.
a
For
phase
all
control
projects?
construction, yeah,
Not just state projects.
no,
Yeah.
all projects.
Mhm.
So you might just take a look at that one, because it lists all the things that the state
Right.
wants you to, they're trying to standardize it throughout, so take a look at
To
that.
help building inspectors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the local building inspector has input into it too,
Mhm.
you know, so, it's a new thing they're trying to do, so.
Whatever is finally determined between Kyle and his team and the building inspector as it relates to inspections and tests and so forth, be written into the specifications by section. So we'll end up, like I said, with an inspection program
Good.
will be bought independently. That's another independent group that'll come in and that we'll make sure that we call them in to do all the inspections required that Kyle and his team have agreed with the building inspector have to be done.
Okay, good.
Mike?
Just for the record, our building inspector is a PE,
What is that?
professional engineer.
Of what?
Oh, he is. I
Structural.
didn't even know that.
Structural?
I didn't even know.
Does the OPM or the
Well
MSBA have an engineer that overlooks or looks at the plan for the drainage?
No. No, that's our technical evaluation.
That's why I was
Planning board.
concerned about the site approval for review.
Yeah, we'll be reviewing, Peter, we'll be reviewing the documents, you know, if we see something running uphill, we're gonna obviously mention it to Kyle.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna do engineering calculations to look at the calculations on flood storage and the size of piping.
Yeah.
We'll just review it for overall configuration as it relates to practical application. But, we obviously will rely on the people that are responsible to engineer and design it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Sure. All right, we're gonna backtrack and go to, approval of the minutes from January 15th. Everybody get a chance to review them? Wanna look at mine?
You wanna bring up my screen notes?
You wanna look at mine?
Glad to see everybody reads the things we send out.
I have a screen.
We're trying to go green. I make copies and no one takes them, so I've cut
I
back.
know, we don't, yeah.
An amount of ink. Oh, good.
Definitely.
So you did half your homework.
All right, would you like to make a motion? A motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of January 15th, 2013.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. What is today?
22nd.
Okay. All right, so Carl, you met with some members and the consultants on site again, and you're prepared to give us another update on site?
We did, we distributed minutes again, I don't know.
Yep.
The committee got those?
They did?
We had a follow-up meeting with our landscape architect and civil engineer, and Pat was there, as well as Margaret and Carol, and I think that
George.
might have been it. And then members of the committee, George and Rob and Ellie, to review an update on some of the open issues from the first time around. And we also shared, we got some feedback in the interim on possible playground equipment and styles, and that was shared, and some good feedback on, in that direction too, so that our landscape architect can better, specify certain kinds of equipment and all. that may be a place to start. Again, the plan, colored one on the playgrounds. Remember, we reviewed there are two play structures, one for the younger children, one for the older children here. And our landscape architect had put together this package that comes from actually vendors of playground equipment to show for the younger children, you know, some different styles. And I think the couple points that were made, and these are actual drawn to scale as to what could fit. And we're talking about this smaller one, first of all, what could fit in there. And I think, you know, what we heard is that something more like this, more open, in a larger structure, but not just one single structure, made the most sense. And so there is room for, you know, one large structure and a couple smaller ones in that area. The openness where, you know, there's still challenging kinds of things, particularly some of the hanging, climbing sorts of things was felt to be important. Slides, like I say, as opposed to, you know, some of these, when you look at them, they're a little bit more enclosed. That was felt to be kind of a negative, you know, for supervision. We don't want places where, you know, kids could really hide, or even the tubes are not as good as open slides. So we got that kind of feedback, and now we have a good direction. We know we don't like these fake trees. We've got plenty of real trees on the site, so.
That one that you showed, would it have the shades? The one that you showed?
The fabric one?
Yeah.
With fabric shades there, yeah. These guys?
Yep.
Yep.
It would have those.
Yep, that's all part of the system, yeah. So, so that was for the younger children, and then for the older, even bigger, but the same general comments applied. And again, I think this was one of the preferred ones, again, if we don't necessarily need the fake trees though. But in terms of, you know, the size of the structure, and again, this wouldn't fill the whole area. There's room for one large structure like this, plus a couple smaller ones, so there's good choices for kids to make here, but you
Carl,
can
can I just
see.
ask, so with the structures that you're looking to put on there, is it all gonna be structures, or is there still room for them to like run around and?
In these rubberized areas, as you see in the plan
Weren't there gonna be
here.
basketball hoops too?
Yeah, we're
This is
just talking
only
about
the
purely the
orange
colored
part.
areas.
Okay.
The rubber surface areas. That's where the structures would be.
Yeah.
All of this area is runaround area.
Okay, okay.
There's
Okay.
more runaround space than this
Gotcha,
stuff,
okay.
actually. So, like, here's the one, you can see the size of the structure you can get in there, but this one, again, was a little too enclosed, I think, but has some of the challenging things that were identified as being positive in there, and also, let's see, yeah, that one too, again, a little bit more enclosed. So I think this first one is, but you can see even the pieces, they're flexible, they're arrangeable to fit the configuration of the space we have and so forth. And again, like a lot of products we've mentioned in this project here, we may specify a certain kind, but when the time comes for the contractor to actually buy it and make a submittal to us, we can't guarantee it'll be this brand. We've gone through many projects where, you know, we have it to this level of detail and say, you know, this is what the spec is based on. And another manufacturer will come in and say, well, you know, I have a slide that's like this, I have this, and it's done, and everything's, and we have to sort of go through, it's kind of tedious, piece by piece, to prove that it's an equal. And it's a cute sort of thing, you have to prove that it has equal play value, you know, to this little kind of spider's web. Well, we have this kind of spider's web. You know, it's a little different, or it's made of nylon, this one's made of whatever.
But we will be able to say, if they come back with one that we think is too enclosed, no,
Yes.
that's not what we're
yes,
looking for. Okay.
Yes, yeah. You know, there are certain characteristics of a product that, you know, you can use to determine whether it's equal or not.
Okay.
So,
I had a quick question on the
yes, Dave.
particular one that, the roof structure on those, the material, is that a cloth material?
Maybe
Um,
canvas?
Is it,
Yeah, the ones with the fabric.
the fabric.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think fabric leads
It-
too much to,
I don't know exactly if it's nylon, let me see if they spec it here, but it's certainly obviously meant to be outside. It's not something that's gonna deteriorate.
but it's easily vandalized.
Oh, yeah, that's another reason that actually it was preferred to be more open, less surfaces to
Right.
spray paint or vandalize in that
It's not only
sense.
that, it's the
But-
cloth. I just can't see cloth at all.
Yeah,
And, it fades in the sun, number one. It, I mean, do you take it in every day or it stays there? I mean, it just leads itself to be ripped or,
Some of them come
cut
with
or-
fiberglass, canopies as opposed to cloth.
Yeah, something, a hard material that can't be vandalized. I mean, again, I know
they
it's a
don't
minor
identify.
detail, but.
no, that's
just-
important.
You ever put one of
They
those
don't mention what
pop-up
it's
tents
made
out,
of.
leave it out overnight, or leave it out for a week and see
It's-
what
it's
happens?
not
You know,
canvas. It's not canvas.
It's not, what they use on the top of,
I like to see
my kids are a
Plastic.
little younger than yours, and we've got, I mean, they last.
They're
But they act
nylon.
just the same, though.
They're nylon flies. I would imagine you wouldn't leave it out all winter. You'd probably take it down for the season. But it's gonna be mold resistant. It's gonna be
Yeah,
mildew
I mean-
resistant.
Easily cut, though.
Like
That sort of
tarp
thing. But right, it could be
material.
vandalized.
Easily vandalized. Something that's hard plastic, PVC covering on the roof is much, much more difficult to
You get a lot
vandalize.
of bees with the hard ones, though. They
Yeah.
get the nests.
Yeah.
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 Is that full sun in those two areas?
Yeah.
They-
Well, it depends how close we get to the
The
trees
winter,
here,
but
Peter,
not
but the
PVC
south
stuff.
sun is coming in this way, so we want it to be sunny, so you can use it greater part of the year, but that's why you also want to provide some shade. This one too, again, at midday, it's gonna be in the sun, in that regard, depending on how tall these trees are right here, you're gonna get some shading there, but they're gonna be pretty sunny, so they'll dry out too. I mean, if they do get moist, they're gonna get sun. So, well, we can make that note and make sure we
Yeah, I'm
check
concerned
on,
about the
on
covering,
those
yeah,
issues.
top,
um,
whatever.
but that was, one part of the discussion. Then the next part of the discussion, as the notes show, had a lot to do with, this talks about reduced pavement widths and talks about curbing. There's a practice now called low-impact development that tries to, minimize how much pavement there is in the world, minimize how much erosion is caused by stormwater, and tries to be a more natural kind of development. A lot of planning boards and cities and towns enforce it, encourage it, that sort of thing. And so we spent a great deal of time talking about that, and our engineers are working on fine-tuning some of these things so that, we look at the width of like every driveway, every roadway surface to make sure it's only as wide as it needs to be, and that we've got curbing only where we need it to be, that sort of thing. And, so, for instance, this loop road, once you get past this parking lot, is a one-way system, to there effectively. It's just one way. And so that roadway width could be narrowed down 14 feet, might even be 12 feet with sort of, shoulders there to reduce the amount of pavement and therefore reduce the amount of runoff on the site. So,
And reduce the costs.
and reduce the costs, right, less pavement. You still need to reinforce, the 14 feet wide with, compaction and all, but having less pavement is less money too, up front, as well as, stormwater management issues after the fact. So, they're trying to get that down. We're, in terms of curbing, we recognize that anywhere that there's a sidewalk right, adjacent to a road, particularly at the drop-off areas, the two major ones, the bus drop-off all the way around to here and the car drop-off from here to here, that those should be vertical granite curbs. Those are the safest, those are the longest lasting, to separate, sidewalks and cars. In other areas where, we can pull a sidewalk away from a road, and have a planting strip, you don't necessarily have to rely on a vertical granite curb to separate the two. So we'll try and do that too in places where we can. But in other areas too, we may need curbs to contain water so that there's not, if we can't do a swale or some way to collect the water right off the roadway surface, we may need some curbs. But we would do the, what's called Cape Cod berm. It's very low profile, sort of wide bituminous kind of curb. It's not the vertical,
Red Glove.
It sort of looks like,
A 6-inch radius, yeah.
yeah, the kind that plows tear up regularly every winter, The low profile ones, the plow can actually ride up on it and back down if they hit it without tearing it up. But it contains water, so if water's running along, you can direct it to a catch basin and into the ground. In some of these major parking areas, as we talked about, we're looking at trying to, sheet the water across this and pick it up in these green areas here, so that we wouldn't necessarily have a curb along the lower edge there, things like that. So we talked about. Let me see if there are any other notes there. Or George, you might remember the other key points we made.
Well, I was kind of uncomfortable with not having Peter there, but we had budgeted a certain amount for the entryway for drainage. And
At Elm Street.
and
Yeah.
Nish had recommended 4 catch basins, 2 right at the entrance, and maybe another 2 about 500 feet up. And that's what I thought you would suggested. And I also pointed out that would it be possible to tie in that drainage to that creek that's about 100 feet away that runs across Elm Street? If we had a treat, if it's treated in the catch basins, it goes to that culvert that crosses Elm Street about 100 feet up.
It may have to be treated before it gets to the catch
Right.
basin, like, before it gets to the river besides the catch basins.
Yeah,
It
that's a little
does.
brook, right?
Excuse me?
It's more of a brook than
Yeah.
a river, but they were gonna look into that, see how far away it is.
Yep.
I estimate it's about 100 feet, so it wouldn't be, try to stay within that.
Yep.
What do we budget for that, Pat? Was it 300?
I'm just,
We had
I'm just
like
looking at.
total of 300,000.
We have $300,000
Yeah.
for Elm Street, that intersection, and whatever you want to do there, which sounds like a fairly healthy allowance right now to pick up that work.
Rob had mentioned looking at the existing sidewalk and curbing on the driveway. That's, from Elm Street in, that is not in great shape there. And originally, other than that allowance, we hadn't planned to do any work there. And we were just blending, the new driveway, the new roadway into the existing, actually right about this point here. And this was gonna be the existing driveway out to Elm Street. And even the sidewalk, we're tying in, a couple of pieces of new sidewalk here, but we were tying into the existing at that point. So, some of that 300,000 may go if we want to look at replacing that curbing, and then, ultimately, and I think everyone could visualize, it would be nice to, right, starting at Elm Street, have a nice new driveway coming up into the school, even if it's the same alignment, it would just, new surface. It would put a, sort of the finishing touch on the project in the right way. So when we price this up at design development, we'll make sure we, identify that part of the work and how much is needed for drainage. They also asked too about the status of the work on Elm Street, because the drainage coming off the driveway, it may tie into the brook as one thing, it may tie into Elm Street, depending on how that's being handled. That would be the most economical for this project.
Yep.
If we could do that, because then all that drainage could get treated at once or something like that. We'd still have storm scepters or whatever those, special catch basins are, but
Yeah.
It could tie into there, and we wouldn't have to take it the 100 feet or whatever to the next stream.
Dave, I would assume as this project gets closer to being completed, the selectmen would have looked into, whatever is gonna be done on Elm Street to tie in, so we're not talking about doing work that could potentially tie into.
Right, you can't, but I agree with taking a look at the sidewalks and taking a look at the roadway going in. We should take a look at that, but yeah, absolutely, it has to all fit in to the whole project, so we've made that quite clear.
I think you have to keep us on track, you guys have to keep us on track for costs,
Mhm.
make sure we're staying within the budget, so.
The other thing was maybe tie in some of that project.
Maybe that you
With
can't
the Elm
afford to
Street.
redo the pavement, or, you know, you have to live with the existing sidewalk or whatever, but, you know, if we know the cost
One of the things too that's
of these things, then we can make our.
one of the opportunities is, even if we don't buy it at the beginning of the project, if we don't use up all the contingency, you know, if there are fewer change orders than expected, the paving's one of the last things on the project, you could make the decision to add it in at that time too. So you, in that sense, you have some time to make that decision.
Carl, what happens with the emergency access if, you have right now 150?
Something like that. Again, it was an allowance, it was
We
a
have
funny number,
there's
like
100
100.
like 152,000.
Yeah,
But that's
150.
for the, the roadway. That water line comes through there anyway.
That was
so
already in
the-
there.
So that the clearing, the rough grading,
Excavation.
the water line, burying the water line, which means you're gonna be left with rough grade. From there, we have 152,000 to do something with some paving and so forth.
The Johnsons do have a door on the left side of the house. You know how you were talking about the driveway on the left side? They do have a door there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, as noted in here, I think we mentioned that what we're looking at for the emergency drive, again, probably shows that better here, but, these parallel lines drawn here are like 14 feet wide or 12 feet wide, I think. And we may well compact an area that wide and reinforce the soil, but we're gonna try a section, a roadway section that has only like 4 or 5 feet of pavement. And underneath it is good draining material with a filter fabric and a water line that's, buried down there where it has to be. So that it can be plowable, it can also be walkable for a pedestrian path. And it'll minimize, how much drainage is needed to handle that, rather narrow section of walkway.
Was that
pavement.
required, Carl, to have that?
We
Because
sort
for,
of by consensus made it required.
oh,
Tilly,
I
that-
gotcha.
that
Because
not
for
only-
years we didn't have it, and
Right. We feel
We
if we're
use
gonna
the
have it,
same
it
road.
should be plowable, so that's where we are. And where it intersects at Elm Street by the Johnsons' property there, we would, if we can, in a straightforward way, clearly separate the town's property then from the private property. We can do some buffering on the town's property so that the roadway or whatever bit of roadway is there in her side yard isn't, immediately visible. We can have some planting, we could have a nice kind of fence in a way, because if it is used as a pedestrian path too, we don't want people, cutting across her yard. They should be coming from Elm Street directly into the walkway to go up that way. So all that would be in the $150,000 allowance, whatever improvements we make on that path.
And we have a gate at one end of that road, or?
Well, we'd have a gate at both ends,
Okay.
because we don't want cars to even attempt it, so.
So that's in that 150,000 as well, right? Couple of
It's
days.
just a swing arm gate, a utilitarian kind of thing.
What happens if the budget goes over 150 for that? Where does that money come
We'd have
from?
to find some other line item to make it up if,
We're gonna look at the whole thing as a total budget.
Total.
When
Yeah.
you get done with this whole thing, you got a $36 million budget you're working on. So you're gonna be looking at it in totality, so that if that ended up being 160 or 170,000, hopefully something else is gonna be less money, because now, again, a lot of these things are allowances. So now you're gonna take a look at each one of these things incrementally, take a look at the whole budget and see how each one stacks up.
Is there-
Any place you can go in and value engineer, we'll be making notes on that.
Is there any contingency for these sorts of?
Well, there's contingency
wrong.
within in that 36 million at this level, I think there's probably a 5% design contingency in there, which is obviously $1.5 million, $1.8 million, which could be distributed to the other items. So
So
this
that's
is-
where, that would be.
Yeah,
one
and
of
in
the-
this estimate, there'll be another design contingency. It'll be less than that because the design is further advanced.
Right,
Maybe
sure,
there'll be a 2 or 3%, you know?
sure, yep. Has the engineer come up with his section yet, do you know, for the access road?
I haven't seen it yet, Rob. A couple other things that we talked about at that site meeting was these new playing fields that will replace the school once the new school comes online and the existing school is demolished. It was suggested that we, in whatever way we can, maximize the usable play area there. So it may not be a full-size baseball field, it may not be a full-size adult soccer field, but whatever we can do, we're sort of hemmed in by the slope and the wetland setback on the east here. There's there's a change in grade here and a new septic field going in here, you know, there's the change in grade here, so there's a few limitations, but to the extent we can, we're gonna maximize the flat green space there. And then we also agreed that a spot somewhere right about here, which is, as you come out the front door of the school now, just to the right, there's a pathway down to the fields there, but there's a spot, there's a hydrant there, there's an overhead pole there, is a spot for a future garage, future shed building. And we would put in a pad only now, concrete pad, and bring power to that location. And that's it in terms of this project. And this pathway here would basically be a gravel pathway for now, not paved. This pavement would end right there, so you could get into and out of that parking lot that way. And this is just basically a service drive to access that.
Is that the existing pad or driveway now for the front of the school where you're talking about?
It's pretty close to the existing, yep. So
Because
if
I
you just-
measured from,
If you just went straight, you'd see right at the front of the school, there's a hydrant there and
Yep.
overhead.
Yeah.
You can visualize right where that pad would be going.
I measured from the hill in front of the school to the rear of the school, and it was 400 feet, and it's 300 feet from the rocks to the, that way,
this
yep.
Yep. It's a big area.
Yep.
It's a big area. The existing footprint of the school is just about a full-size soccer field itself, the footprint, when you square it up. So, yeah, there's some space in front, and,
Do you need that pathway between, just below that you pointed to?
this pathway?
Yeah. Why wouldn't you just have it coming right off
Well,
the
I
drive?
mean, one of the things, when you see the amount of fields here,
Yeah.
and that amount of parking, we anticipate people are gonna park here. So you need some way, I think, to get to those fields from here. I mean, you could walk back out that way. We don't think people will do that. They're gonna cut across.
Yeah, no, I just
I
meant, I thought
driveway.
you were putting in something as wide enough
They're
to
not
drive
gonna
on,
park in
and
another
I'm
parking
questioning
lot.
that, really.
Well, if this becomes the maintenance garage, you would be driving on it.
Yeah,
So
but I'm saying just come from the end
a
of the.
plow or a tractor,
I'm just saying come from the end of the
yeah,
parking lot,
you could do that as well.
and then just minimize as much of these paths, you know.
Yeah.
as
I
we
mean,
can.
it's
I
gonna
think
be
a path is
cleared,
good there,
so
but,
it sort of exists already. It's also the alignment of where the septic line is gonna run in the future, is basically down there. Cause we're gonna take the existing school, which currently goes in this direction, and pipe it to the new septic field at some point.
So I would
Across
just
the front.
request that when you take a look at this and you're trying to maximize it, because I think it's important that we're doing
Yeah.
this whole project, it's a lot of money, we should get out of it what we really need as a town, and so to let us know how big it is and what we can fit on it or can't fit on
Sure,
it
sure.
in the end, so.
And if there's any money left over, would you be able to complete that storage area?
You could, yes, yep, some projects have done that, Tilly, at the end. There was some thought that maybe this could be a sort of a volunteer project or a student project to put up the garage, but yes, we've done that on other projects. At the end, if there's contingency money, it could go into constructing something like that. Then the other thing we just confirmed too was about irrigation systems. Right now, in the project budget and the schematics, we did include a budget allowance for drilling a well, or possibly 2 wells, but it's just a dollar, amount right now. Was it 50,000, Pat?
Yeah, we have 50,000 for
In there?
2 wells plucked out of the air,
Right.
and then we had 52,000 for, generally speaking, irrigation, could be water cannon or whatever. So there's $100,000 for irrigation between wells and some sort of distribution system.
I just like the correction, I asked in the comments that if we could actually not increase to 50,000, but to reduce to 25,000.
Yeah.
I didn't,
Yes.
I wanted to see if we could just use one
Sure.
well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I think we
Yeah.
talked real quick, I think I think I mentioned to you that at Triton, we have an irrigation system there that it runs off wells, and it was anticipated at the time there'd be 2 wells. We ended up putting the first well in, we got about 15 gallons a minute, anticipating the second well would give us the same. Second well went down in excess of 200 feet deeper, ended up with about 3 or 4 gallons. So we ended up doing a third well, which feed a holding tank and so forth. So it's hard to say what you're going to get out of the wells until you get down there and do actually start to run the tests on them and see what you're going to get.
Still,
So-
it's gonna be cheaper than using town water to supply, irrigation, because if you look at some of the figures that the schools use, Pembroke uses like twice as much water than the high school.
Yeah.
And so we're,
Well, it's also a matter of, you know, when there's a ban, a mandatory, you know, for watering,
Right.
we don't wanna water our schools when everybody else can't, but then we don't wanna have our fields die either. So I think the wells are a pretty good way to go anyways.
yeah,
So-
well, from a watershed perspective, Pembroke is its own sub-watershed. And it's considered supercharged because it receives water from the town well fields, which is on the Parker River.
Right.
And the Parker River kind of gets desiccated during the summer because it's supplying the rest of the town downstream. And a lot of the downstream water ends up in Pembroke watershed. And I would imagine, well, at least Mass GIS has Pembroke watershed as supercharged with water.
So you think there's a lot of water there?
I think there,
Sounds like it.
there's not a lot of,
So,
it should be more than the Parker River, because I keep an eye on the Parker, and I've seen it go dry,
Yeah.
so.
The point we were just reinforcing at the meeting though was, even though we have that allowance in there for wells, we don't have any provision for actually, you know, installing an irrigation system in here.
Well, there's another 52,000 for some distribution.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the new field here.
Yeah.
So you could drill one well, find out that you have plenty of water with that one
You could.
well, and then use the rest of the money for a sprinkler system.
You could.
Could.
Yeah.
You know, one thing, it gets a little tricky in public bidding to deal with wells, because we don't have that flexibility. We have to put something in the contract documents. We can't say like, you know, start drilling and we'll watch, and when you hit enough, we'll tell you to stop and only charge us for that. We have to be more definitive in how we quantify it, and it gets a little bit tricky. And we'll continue to carry this in the budget, but I think we should continue this conversation, because it may be that we want to pull it out of the project and just do it separately, where you have more flexibility.
Is this something GAA might be interested in helping out with? If it involved maybe the other fields too?
Well, you know,
A sprinkler system, you mean? I'm sure they would.
Well, but you already said there's $52,000 in there for that.
That could be just for the wells, though.
Well, we know
No,
we
no,
have
no,
we
no,
have
no,
we
no,
have
no.
we have a $50,000 allowance for wells,
Yeah.
and then we have another 50,000 plus for some sort of distribution, whether it's water cannons or.
So 100,000?
So there's about 100,000 in there right now for wells and or distribution.
but you were, I mean, Carl, you just said it, that was more geared towards the new fields. that
The
were
new
going in.
fields,
Right.
not
Didn't
the
really
existing.
take into account the existing
The other
fields.
fields.
So,
You're not gonna have a
maybe
building
what
nearby.
Carl's-
We were
maybe
trying to
what
draw a
Carl's-
clean line between the
Yeah.
new fields and the
Right.
old fields.
So maybe what
'cause-
Carl's saying is that as we continue this discussion, maybe it is pulled out of the bid process, but not our overall project. And then
Right.
we can make it so that maybe we can get water if there's enough money for the whole thing, which everybody really would love. So, because it all dies every year.
mhm.
It's hard to keep that thing going.
Okay.
I have another question that I meant to ask you when we were talking about playgrounds.
Mhm.
It came up in conversation, or I got an email today, asking what type of storage there is near the playgrounds.
Oh, right. Well, in terms of formal storage, in the building itself, we have a room that's about 10 by 12, kind of 10 by 15, something like that. That's labeled outdoor storage room. That's over here. Some people would use that for certain kinds of storage. If we're talking about balls and kind of gym equipment, there's a gym storage, you know, inside the building that kind of under the purview of the PE teacher there. In terms of other smaller kinds of things, the people that make, you know, plastic fiberglass equipment can make plastic fiberglass, you know, storage. If there's bean bags or little thing, you know, those kinds of things that can be stored outside.
I have a feeling part of it had to do with some of the little riding trikes or whatever else that they use. Where would be the ideal spot for those?
Well, you might want to consider, you know, getting a storage thing as part of the structure to
Okay.
to house those. I don't know how many, we'd be talking about like that, but
Roderick, did they use the riding trikes in first grade, in kindergarten, or is it just preschool?
It's just the preschool.
It's just preschool.
But,
Yeah.
Hula hoops
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
balls and jump ropes and the track and the
yeah,
other equipment.
yeah, those things should go in a plastic storage container outside.
That could stay out there.
On the playground, so it's right there, easily supervised, that kind of thing.
Okay, so we could get that through
Right,
whoever
through these guys,
provides
the manufacturer.
the outside, okay.
Carl,
Okay.
one part that wasn't on the meeting minutes there, we had talked about you were gonna locate an area for community gardening and
Yeah.
a water
Oh, yeah.
source, and just, it was gonna get designated on the,
Yeah,
in the
we
back
did
there
talk
for,
about that, that should have
yeah.
been in there, thanks.
The community garden for vegetables or flowers?
Could be anything, science program based.
This the one that's going on the roof?
You could, you could grow vegetables, they could become part of the program that the kids eat. They could grow herbs that the people could start.
think it's
But
great.
More importantly, it would be, hopefully, become part of the science curriculum, so that we start reconnecting our kids with nature.
Yeah.
So it's not really community gardens, it's for the school.
It's
school
school
gardens,
community,
yeah.
the school community,
Yeah,
Yeah.
not
'Cause
the
I-
Georgetown
we already have a
community.
community
Yeah.
garden, so.
yeah.
So was it set up from from the roof drains to supply the water? Is that what you're?
He's gonna put a
No,
spigot.
No.
the water supply would be a spigot.
We're gonna have outside, hose bibs
Yeah.
around the building, and depending on where this ends up, it might be close enough to the building that you can use one of those. If it's not, then we think about, locating a remote one, so that it could, provide water right at the garden location without dragging hoses across a playground or something.
Right.
And I know we're gonna come back to it, but when you get to talking about the fields and irrigation, lawn irrigation, fertilizer, these kinds of developments with projects are one of the greatest contributors to, water quality issues and pollution that we have. And while I'm all for irrigation in a general sense, I think we need to have a serious discussion about water is probably our number one resource, and how we use it wisely and where we allocate it.
Generally, Rob, we've seen it, in the past, recent projects that the Conservation Commission asked the applicant, for a turf management program, so they can see what kind of fertilizers are anticipated, and it can get written into the order of conditions, that they have to be organic, or they have, with so many applications per year, and that sort of thing.
Good. And did they get into the grass seed too, the grass seed mix?
Well, they'll look at that, yeah,
Certain
to
grasses,
determine how much water's needed and
Yeah.
what kind of chemicals are needed to support it, yeah. So, I think those are the highlights of the site meeting that we had. Like I said, some of these things are still in process, as they try to fine tune exactly roadway widths and curbing in particular, and that'll have an impact on the pricing, but we will get another drawing out, as part of the pricing package here, for people to review.
I have one question on
Yes, Jeff?
there's a note in there, I think, if I remember correctly, about skinning up the loop that goes around for the bus drop-off and possibly using
Mhm.
gravel edges and stuff. Is there any
Yes.
concern with gravel being along the edges in a school situation with rocks?
Well, it's not,
tops and-
we're not talking about rocks, that kind of gravel, we're talking about compacted earth,
Oh, compacted.
And that was one of the concerns of our engineer too, was not the rock part of it, but
Crushed stone.
the edge of the roadway
Versus
deteriorating,
Right, right.
if it doesn't have a defined edge. So trying to come up with a balance of having a defined edge to keep the pavement from unraveling.
Right.
But also minimizing pavement width. But anywhere where, we were talking about that around here. Here, we're gonna have a defined edge, obviously, on the drop-off edge, the school side of the road. But on the other side of the road, that's where they were talking about possibly narrowing the pavement, but maybe putting in a concrete edge to hold the pavement, and then having the shoulder, the gravel shoulder, so the pavement is stabilized down
It
there.
also allows for safety vehicles to turn around when
To
there's no
pass, yeah.
curbing.
The other minor note there too, in looking at the roadway widths also got us to look at some very sort of subtle areas where, you know, when you're coming in here, this is two ways, you know, you can go in and out right now, originally. If you come in here, you know, if you're a stranger, you might be tempted to keep going. That's a no-no. This is one way going out. So we'd want to design this in such a way that it directs you, you know, into the parking lot, and by skinning up this roadway here, it actually cuts off that lane, you know, so things like that. And also, as you come across the front of the school, we want it to have a defined pull-out lane, so cars can be parked, and other cars can pass them. There's a defined travel lane. And that should be signaled sort of at the beginning and the end, you know, with a defined, so it's not just like two cars moving in parallel, which is kind of dangerous. You want one to have the right of way and be the travel lane, and the other to be the pull-out lane. So we made some of those suggestions. We also thought about making this one way in, and therefore this becomes, you know, the way out of the parking lot. So this becomes the only real two-way access point, because you got these vehicles coming out here. It might be safer if we're all, you know, just this traffic coming out, not mingling with the parking lot traffic. If all the parking lot traffic went this way, it might be safer. And, you know, this is one way out too, here, you know, coming around this way. So our civil engineer is reviewing that and talking over with his traffic guys in his office as to how best to improve that flow and make it both simple, straightforward, but at the same time kind of safe, and not necessarily relying on signs, but just in, you know, the way the roads are laid out, and sort of the intuitive nature of the way people travel.
So, yeah, because it'd be important to leave the parking lot area able to move around when you're trying to find a spot.
You got to be able to go back, right?
Right.
If you come in and you
Right.
don't find a spot, you got to be able to. So yeah, these pieces are two-way right here. If you know you pull in here, you don't find a spot. We want to go this way. You don't want to have to go back out on the road,
Right, right.
to come back, right? So that's why we wouldn't rely on signage there. We wouldn't say this is one way only at that point. You could turn around and you know find a
Yeah, I mean,
parking
it seems to
spot.
me that one main entrance into the parking lot either way is the right thing, and because the side one, you're gonna run into problems with that one.
Yeah, I think most people would take the first available entrance into the parking lot, which is another sort of intuitive thing. So we have some signage there too to identify parking here, but I think that makes the most sense. And then you can have
That's okay,
all the
don't
cars
worry about
flowing
it,
out.
Eric.
Not
Looked at it so many
interfering
times.
with each other.
Why don't you just connect the parking spaces together so that you close it in?
Which one's the?
Down by the
Two
curve
lots.
and road. You see where it's, instead of the road going there, just connect the parking area.
These?
Yeah.
Two lots.
Right.
Well,
No, you need the
we've got
bus.
this movement,
The
though.
bus.
We do have buses need to come in there and pull
I
out.
got you.
So
Okay.
that's why we need that section.
Uh-huh.
So, and also in the bigger picture,
Could have a
you know, we've been balancing too, having a sea of pavement here with introducing some large islands, you know, where we can get some trees
Right.
and break up the pavement too. So these are good opportunities to do that in addition to.
How will that
one
be
there
for
and
plowing?
one there. That's what we're balancing.
We're not
We had a lot of conversation
Peter,
on
I
it, just so
tried
you
fighting for
know.
all, getting rid of all the curbing.
And Rob said, "Who cares?"
No, one of the things I said is you
What-
aren't aware.
You said something about, oh, it's only like 5 or 6 storms a year, and then I talked about, you know, how many parking spaces do we have? 270 or something like that, and they said, well, that's for the, you know, the pin night and then this other night, and I'm thinking, there's 4 nights, and I'll tell you right now, when people go to that gym, they're not gonna park in the parking lot, they're gonna park in the fire lane, they're gonna park on the side of the road, that bus loop going around, they're not gonna park in the parking lot. I saw it tonight, I was walking into the gym tonight, and a person parked right in, like, if he went another foot, he would've hit the sign that says no parking. So, no, they won't.
But we said that would be okay.
What?
you know, that if
They
in the
park there.
evening, not during the day, but if in the evening people park in
And that's
that
another
loop.
reason to have that shoulder, so that
Right.
people park there, you can still
Right.
pass them and get out.
I don't know
Yeah,
if
but
this,
then on
I
the
don't
other-
know if this is gonna make you feel any better, Peter, but there used to be a little bump out on the top road.
We got rid of one.
Got rid of that. There used
He's
be
getting
a
to
bump
sound like
out.
the old
Right there,
road
bump up here.
maintenance
Poor
guy.
Peter.
Got
That's
rid of
nice.
this. Yeah. We got rid of the one that was on the top.
In order to just make one
in
larger
order to
one.
have just
What,
one
what's
in
that,
the middle.
what's that, middle one got a tree?
Several
Hopefully it's
trees.
hopefully it's gonna
That's
be
the
a
idea, to make it
landscape.
feel like a little piece of the woods.
The idea is.
I tried getting rid of the curbing, but
Have you seen the
I'll
machine
get
that plows
plowed.
the schools?
Rob won't.
You know, maybe
It's a big
the,
lot.
How about
It's a big lot.
the teachers, the teachers parking lot down to the right?
Yeah.
Is there parking on the back side of that? Like, it looks, I can barely see it from here.
No, there's just inside the loop, just in here. This-
Yep.
From here all the way around, there's no parking at all on
where
that
the,
road.
where I see the two islands, right
Right
there.
in there.
That's all parking, yeah.
How
All the
about-
way around the edges.
Yeah.
And then in the
Yeah, all
middle.
the way around the edges and in between.
Yeah, we need to get rid of that island too.
This here,
Right on each edge.
we anticipate,
Snow?
rock and snow. But that's a good snow storage area. Here's another good snow storage area. But this is a high point on the site, and we remember the additional borings and test pits that you authorized. We just got preliminary results back, and sure enough, right there, there's a rock outcropping that's probably 6 feet above the proposed grade. Because we're cutting this area in order to get this roadway to work.
Are you
in
gonna
there.
use low curbing for those type of areas too?
For these islands?
Well,
There.
all around
All
the
around, I
perimeter
mean,
too.
around the edges.
Oh, yes, we would try to. You know, here, there might be need for vertical because there's a walkway.
Right.
But yes, low curbing everywhere else. So,
Aren't,
yeah, you can push the snow off the edges of this.
aren't those islands required on the best management practices?
That's part
You
of it.
can't get out of that.
We're like this, people. There's
He's
people
trying,
pulling
Tilly.
both ways.
Yeah, I
No
mean,
curbing,
those
you know,
are,
Make it wide open.
Peter.
pavement,
Oh, yeah.
no,
Peter,
no
that's-
trees.
I don't think you realize how long it's gonna take to plow that school. You could
Oh,
have
it's gonna
school,
take
you
a
could have
long
school at the high
time.
school and not have,
No.
school at Pembroke. You could, so is that, can you do that? Say, can't have school
hey,
at
everybody
Pembroke.
but Pembroke.
That's why we have those robocalls.
Here's
Come
what our
on.
We get
landscape
more money
architect
from the
says here.
selectmen for the.
We've already deleted these islands here,
Yeah.
down the middle. We took
Excuse
those
me?
out
He
for you, so
doesn't-
now
yeah,
we've
he
got,
doesn't
you know,
speak.
double
Yeah,
bays
well, the-
there,
well, the-
interrupted.
How about the 12 kids that
originally-
walk to school
You know, they were-
that you have to plow the sidewalk for?
The 12 kids.
Cause it's,
They're not gonna walk on a snowy day.
I have to have the sidewalks done because,
Have to be done.
Yeah,
Get up
I
early.
know.
Have
well,
to be done.
well, there it's the janitors, so you'll have to have a lot of janitors there. Cause we don't do the sidewalks at the school, so.
We were talking about that.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
nothing you can do when it's a big building. We're
Yeah.
just spoiled because our buildings are small, so the
Well, you
lots are
can make it
small.
easier to plow.
No, I
He
don't-
rubbed
I-
it.
I wish
Rob
you'd-
took
I
out
wish-
2 jogs.
It could be so
Two.
much worse. I wish you'd say, what a great
What,
compliment.
what I see is, are you gonna see that island in the large parking lot from the school?
That's the whole point of it.
As you come in,
It's-
That's the
especially,
whole
yeah.
point of it.
As you
If,
come
if
in.
you can't see it, then it's
Yeah.
a failure, and we might have to make it bigger.
You see it as you approach the school. You don't see it
I
from the
sug-
school.
I suggested putting a picnic table in the middle of it. That's how big it is. Parents can sit there and wait for their kids.
that's a great idea.
The idea was just to sort of make it look like part of the landscape.
Right,
that-
right.
that was
Put
left
some
there.
benches around. I
Made-
think that's a terrific idea.
Benches made out of the wood that we're gonna take.
Yeah,
down from
we're
the
gonna have
trees.
lots of wood.
I like
We
it.
know what they'll be bringing their
Lumber baron,
lunch and just watch
A
it.
community
Alright.
gathering
Alright.
place
Set
would
on
be the
site.
parking lot.
Okay,
of the-
so I would like to look for a motion to support the discussion from the Playground and Site Committee, the Playground and Site discussion from January 17th with the comments noted tonight.
So moved.
Second.
This is,
Any-
this is for the minutes?
No,
The notes.
the notes.
Just the notes.
Just the notes for, you know, so we're gonna move forward.
we
We're
just
kind of all in
reviewed.
agreement in
I'd
that.
like to add that we should take out a couple more islands.
Carl, add that note. We will continue to look at that as we go forward.
Okay,
No cloth canopies.
got that.
In the first snowstorm, You're gonna have
And
Rob's cell number.
Can you amend it to strike my comment too? That was
I'm gonna take
incorrect.
Carol for a
Which
ride
one?
next time I
I
do
just
Curly.
strike my comment. That
We'll see
wasn't,
how
that wasn't
bad it
right.
is.
We have the chance Friday.
Just strike your comments.
That wasn't,
Oh, all right, so at the very end
yeah.
of Courtney's notes, George, just,
Oh,
Just strike all George's notes.
because there already was the allowance in there.
No, because I didn't say that.
Okay, all right, so take that out.
okay.
You didn't ask for another 50,000?
No,
Okay, because it's already there.
yeah.
Okay. All right, anything further? Did we have a second?
Yeah, I second it.
Okay, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The motion already
Is
carries.
the
All right.
special ed on the agenda too?
The what?
That is
Special
not.
ed. Oh,
The what?
Special
Special
education
education.
meeting we had last week.
Oh, no, we have exterior materials, and then you were gonna update us on FF&E, because we didn't talk about that last time, because you had another meeting.
I was a little, before we just leave the site.
Yep, that's
That's
fine.
why I asked if this was on the minutes or just sort of this, that was a vote of kind of moving ahead, before we leave the site.
From this, yep.
What I just wanted to mention again, my concern with the schedule in that, and this is nothing new for Carl, I've talked to him many times about it, but, so right now, what my concern is that the emergency access drive, we still don't have a plan for that, and we have an allowance number. With the planting plan, we haven't seen, we have an allowance number. The lighting plan, we haven't seen, we have an allowance number. The main drop-off at the front door, the plaza design, we haven't seen that. There's an allowance number built in for that. There's a number of items that as of today, we haven't seen, and they have allowance numbers. And my ultimate concern about it is, I'm trusting that with schools, this is the way the process goes. In our business, we would have these drawings completed at this point in time with numbers on them that you could hang your hat on. And my concern is that these numbers are gonna come in higher. And we're going to not have the money. That's my concern, that we're not gonna have the money. And then when we start to talk about, for example, repaving the entry drive that was gonna be existing and the sidewalk and putting in new curbing there, we're not gonna have money for that. And we're gonna build a $46 million school, and we're gonna have this section of old, beaten-up sidewalk curbing, and it's gonna be like, man, who did this? And so that's my concern. And I just, you know, it is what it is.
Could
Well,
you draw
I think
up
a lot
these
of those
plans?
things that you mentioned, Rob, are gonna be updated in these documents going
I
to
would
the
like to draw
estimators now. So we're not gonna have the same allowances in the, in this packet. What they're doing is transposing a lot of this stuff and upgrading it, so when this goes to the estimators, the allowances, a lot of these allowances that are in there right now, they will have actual dollars and we'll have some
Yeah.
design on this particular, on these DD documents.
Yeah, but what he's saying is, what he's saying is, beyond that, I mean, it's, we haven't seen.
We haven't had the chance
We
to
haven't
meet
seen
with the
it.
subcommittee.
Right.
That next part, or, you know, same thing with the, you know,
Exterior
exterior
materials.
of the building and stuff like that
Right.
with the finishes. We haven't seen anything, so we've both been talking about it, and you know, again, like he said, in our business, it's a different schedule. You know, at the end of DD, we have these things so that you can pretty much hang your hat on them. But it seems like this process is that you go through the DD, you get it more refined, you get a price that's more refined, and then you work from there. Then it's really incumbent on you guys to really work from there, to then work with us through the CD process, which is a lot more designed than I'm used to. But that's fine if that's a process, and then be responsible enough to guide us so that when we get to the end, you know, at the end of CDs, that we're going to have, you know, a building that we can afford with the things in it that we need and want. So.
And the MSBA process speaks to that issue, because this now, as we said before, speaking in generalities, you know, we're advancing this thing now to the roughly the 40% stage. Now, granted, the site would be a lot more advanced than 40%. Other things would be at 20, but it averages 40. But then as part of MSBA's program, we've got to submit a 60%. So now between 40 and 60, you'll have a lot more interplay. You'll see a lot more of the information when we submit the 60. And then we're going to submit a 90. And all of those submissions have full estimates, 2 estimates, us and theirs. So it's monitored all the way through.
So when's the 60? When's that scheduled for?
May
May.
28th.
I don't have that in front of me.
Give or take.
Yeah, May, yeah.
Mhm.
So there's two more substantial estimates and substantial submissions. So this packet is gonna go to the estimators, this packet's gonna go to the commissioning agent, who's gonna look at it as well. So that while the estimators are working on it, the commissioning agent is looking at it, MSBA is gonna start looking at it. So all of this, and you are gonna get another look as the design continues. So, you know, you'll see more and more of the landscaping, you'll see more and more of the site development as it goes forward. And it'll be priced every step of the way.
So the 60%, you know, pricing sounds great. So that makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah.
I think what would be helpful is if you could come up with kind of a listing of what we can expect to be finalized for that 60. I mean, what is it that that you're going to be showing us so that we can get a handle on at the 60%? Because from there to 90, you guys are cranking, you know, for CDs trying to get those done. But design should be like what, completely done
Yes.
by that point?
Yeah, virtually.
Just about virtually
Virtually, yeah.
everything. Okay.
4 months.
You know, again, we might be down to a few alternates or,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah,
VE
yeah.
kind of items when we see the pricing, but
Right. And you
basically
could
all
have
the
to- you're gonna
design
have to respond
decisions.
to that 60% in your last, you know, 40% of your drawings, so, or 30% to get to 90. But,
So-
yeah. Okay. Well, if you could.
Yeah, we don't just go from design development to out to bid and,
So that's
you
what.
know.
Right,
Appreciate
right.
that.
I mean, according to, I'll send you guys this, because you guys have to just check with the MSBA based on their dates, but we were gonna do 60%, basically the end of May, 90% by the end of June, and then 100% by the end of July.
60 to 90. Boom,
And-
Right, right.
And the difference between the previous dates that we had where they were locked in by MSBA board
Yeah.
meetings and things, these are the dates that we have. So MSBA simply says, give us a 60, and we're gonna try and get them to them as fast as we can. And what you have is Kyle's projection as to when the design's
Right.
gonna be in there. And again, just so you know, we already started, when I was down at Kyle's office a couple of weeks ago, we had them put together a set of where we are, even before DDs. They delivered them last week. We're already working on those with an eye toward making sure that in our own mind, things are coming together the way the committee wants. And we're always thinking in terms of budget cuts if we have to make them. We start to develop a VE list as we're going along and reviewing everything. So right now, I have updated MEP drawings, I have updated architectural drawings, and we're halfway through going through what we have here, so that when we get the DD documents, you know, we're already into the process of thinking about what we want to look at further. So it's a continuing evolutionary process that it'll develop what you're looking for eventually at the price you want to pay.
Yeah, and just while we're talking about that, so, we do have a meeting February 5th, but February 19th is our big meeting that we're gonna vote on our design development that's gonna be submitted to the MSBA for this phase.
Carl, I have one other quickie question. Just in reference to what you were talking about using concrete or cement along the
Edge of the road.
the edge of the road, yeah, the curb, not curbing. Is concrete cheaper than using, what is it, hut top?
That's just edging.
No, it's just the edging. It's more expensive, but, in general, but it's just the edge that we're talking
Just an
about.
edge to hold the
Like,
ground.
like this? No, I know it's not a
It's
curb. I
flush.
mean, right, it's just flush to the ground, but are we talking like this or
Oh, I don't know.
a foot? I'm just
Foot maybe?
curious.
Might be a foot.
Because I'm just curious why that would be cheaper than
Well, you're-
another
The
foot of.
pavement.
You're skinnying up the
pavement.
roadway 2 feet, so you're getting rid of,
2
you
feet of
know,
asphalt.
2 feet, or actually, let's call it 3 feet of asphalt, replacing it with 1 foot of concrete, to stabilize the rest of the roadway.
You've probably
But
seen
it's
when
not
you
a
get-
raised curb.
I have
when you get,
seen
when
it.
You get, when you get close to the edge of a road that comes from pavement to landscape in the spring when everything is soft, when you get close to the edge with your vehicle,
It starts unraveling.
it breaks the edge off. And
Yes.
you see that all over the place. So what they're trying to do is give it something
To hold it up.
substantial, so when you get
Okay.
close to the edge, you're not gonna break it off. So if it's concrete and you drive off it, you might sink into the loam a little bit, but you're not gonna damage the end of the edge of the pavement.
If you've
I was
ever
just
been down in,
curious.
Virginia, that area, they do it all
I
over the
I
place.
have, and I have seen it, and I was just curious if concrete was more money, how much you actually saving. That's all. But you're
Well,
saying
yeah.
about a foot.
And it's not just saving cost, it's reducing the amount of impervious material by shrinking the roadway width. So,
And protecting the
and
pavement,
not
so you're
having,
breaking it up. no
not
matter how
having a
wide it
vertical
is, you know?
curb
Yep.
of some kind.
Yeah, I don't like vertical curbs.
Right, right.
Okay.
All right, Carl, do you have more
Well-
for us on the exterior materials today?
We don't have more to show tonight. We were going to meet again with the subcommittee. We had picked another date. I was just looking for that date. I don't have it. It's like February
It's the
7th? 7th? That we could go over that, with the subcommittee and continue that discussion.
Okay.
On the FF&E, that got into, remember, we're talking about that now only in that, how it affects sort of the infrastructure of the building. So that was the purpose of the meeting, even though we did get the administration and teachers to start thinking about some furniture choices, because somewhat it affects the layouts of offices in particular, and some of the other spaces. So we brought in our consultant, we shared some programming information with them to show, kind of a typical elementary school. Here are some of the things that go into it, but there are choices to make on, student desks and chairs, that, things as basic as that, as well as teachers' desks and chairs. So it focused also on, the office area, which includes, the general office, principal's office, the guidance area, the nurses area. That's all in this block here, a conference room. And after that discussion, again, without selecting furniture specifically, there were a few changes, a few revisions to fine tune this. But the basic layout is still more or less the same here. A couple things that we came up with as a result of those meetings. The office area will still be here for the secretaries greeting visitors, as we've talked about, right off the vestibule and right off the lobby here, with a good amount of glass visibility to the front of the school. There's the main conference room in the school right adjacent to that. So again, outside visitors, parents coming in for a meeting can be met, and they don't have to travel very far into the school. They can go right into the conference area. There's a little bit of waiting area there and so forth. So that setup still remains. Behind that area, we've always had one sort of spare office and then the principal's office. We've decided to flip those to make the principal closer to the main office. The sizes will remain the same. They just flipped in configuration there. There is a work area off of this where there's a large format copier, a large volume copier rather, for the whole school, in addition to copiers that will be in each teacher's room. But if you have a lot to do with collating and stapling, that's where the main machine would be. And we put it in a separate room, one, because of the noise it generates, so it's not right out here, but it's certainly immediately adjacent to the people who are using it the most, the secretaries here. There's also room in that area for counters, storage, a sink, could be a small coffee area.
How about mail, or do they get mail
Yeah,
anymore?
and teachers' mailboxes, although those may be going away as we move to the future, but there's still space there for teachers' mailboxes too.
Will you be able to copy off that from your room? Like if I had 400 things, I
It
could
could be
just...
networked, yeah, and you could send it here if you have a large volume to do.
How old's the copying now, Carol? The one we have at Pembroke?
It's probably in the second year of a lease.
They're leased, right?
All leased.
Yeah, if the lease continues, we could move them over, but as part of the furniture and equipment purchasing, you can't lease equipment, you can buy them, but it's not reimbursable if you lease them in the future. But that's a decision we can still make down the road.
They don't want you to bond
Yeah,
purchases
right,
that won't live the length of the bond.
yeah.
So we could not
That's
just,
a lot.
we could just not get a copier and buy
I don't
something
know if a
else
copier lasts that long.
and use the copy that we have on the list.
Sure. The same, with some printers or computers, there may be an inventory of stuff that
Yep.
is reasonably good to bring over.
The technology consultant will really start to get into it at that point, they're really start to nail down. The best way the school wants to manage it, and the school department wants to manage it, printing and all that, whether it's from computers, laptops, iPads, whatever it is. They'll really get into it, they'll spend a lot of time with it.
One of the other things that we fine-tuned in this area, this is the guidance area here. We made sure that was large enough for 2 people to be in there, also large enough.
Yeah, but the machine would
The
be
guidance
long, you still pay.
director now likes to have lunch with a group of kids at once as a way. So it's in essence a second conference room adjacent to this conference room. There's another conference area there. And likewise, the principal's office is large enough. It can have a small conference table in it too. So for smaller meetings, that can happen there. So there's a variety of choices. Upstairs, there's another one I'll mention for special ed conference room. We also introduced, we reduced the plumbing here to provide 1 toilet room here instead of 2. And by rearranging, we can get another extra office in here because, again, we know we've already got, you know, a certain number of so-called itinerants, you know, specialists who come 1, 2, 3 days a week, sometimes more. We've already got a psychologist office, and we may well need another one in the future. That's certainly the way things are going. We need more smaller spaces. So it was felt that that was valuable. And on the other side, in the nurses area here, there was some tweaks to the layout too that came about when we started, you know, thinking about furniture. But basically, the layout is the same. There's a reception area here. There's a shower and toilet room in the center. There's a resting area with 3 beds, and there's an exam nurse's office in that corner. That remained the same, and we basically did sort of confirm that, as I said, with a few tweaks by talking about the furniture and equipment there. The other area upstairs that we, you know, started to look at too is this is the SPED office, and next to it was a resource room that was also going to double as a conference room. One of the changes reflected in the notes that we had from the meeting is that this will actually be the SPED administrative assistant here, and the SPED coordinator for the school will be located here, and this will be a combination conference room office, just the way the principal's office is as well. So that works. It's right at the top of the stairs. If there were, you know, if the main conference room were booked and there was a need for a second one, that would work for, you know, SPED conferences tend to be, you know, the parents, sometimes the advocates for the parents. It can be, you know, 6 or 8 people. They could fit in there. And it can still be a working office as well.
What was that space previous?
A SPED resource room. So
Okay.
it was sort of available, you know, it's a pull-out space that's not scheduled full-time, but it's utilized that way.
What's that space after the wall?
Here?
That.
That's the music room there, and we'll make sure, we talked about this, you know, that we
Insulated.
get good acoustic privacy there. We'll probably have a double wall kind of set up there with insulation in it to really ensure that the privacy and the separation of those spaces.
And on the floor, what do we have on the floor there?
We would have carpet
No, I mean
in
in the
these
band-
office
in the
areas.
band room.
In the band room, we have tile.
Are you gonna put an underlayment underneath that for noise,
Well,
for especially for keeping
Yeah,
beat?
we have the noise from the people below too, coming through, because there's another music room below this. So we are treating both the floor
Oh,
and
and
the
suspended
ceiling
second ceiling.
of the first floor in there for just that reason. That, I mean, fortunately, this one is general music and choir. The band is on the first floor
Yeah,
on a
get on the
concrete
first
slab.
floor. There you
So that's where the
Yeah, we
real
could
percussion
yeah.
sounds is downstairs more than here. But they may be keeping beat up here.
Yeah, I would consider putting an underlayment that'll deaden
Yeah.
that, because
Yeah.
even if you put something underneath it, it's not always gonna hold it for noise.
Is all the shelving and bookcases in the library, they all stationary, are they movable?
They're virtually all movable inside here, George.
Because I was wondering if a community,
Only the ones on the perimeter would be fixed, you know, against the wall. We advocate that not only these be movable, but they be low and they be on casters. So you can move them very, you know, relatively easily. I know when they're low with books, they're a little bit heavy, but still, they can be moved, and they're only, you know, this high throughout here, but they can, you know, work to define areas and so forth, but they keep sort of an openness.
so they could help, they could be moved for like a large community conference, something like that?
Yeah, yeah. It's, you know, it's a nice space. It's gonna have a high ceiling, it's carpeted, quiet, nice light. You know, it could be a lot of things in there. One of the things, you know, we talk about in the furnishings time is we do like round tables, you know, those are nice, but you also want some rectangular tables or square ones so you can push them together. So if you had a community meeting like this, or you'd want to be able to make a U-shaped setup or a conference room setup, so we kind of want a mixture of both kinds of tables in there generally. We do show a circulation desk here, right by the entrance, you know, for checking out books, and it's kind of a office desk almost for the librarian out in the library as opposed to being in the office there. That too, that's often a fixed item because it'll have power, data connections to it. So
Is the whole
keep
place
that.
wireless?
The whole school is wireless.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. But we do have, you know, 4 columns in here. We have places to drop power and data into these areas. We have a bank of computers anticipated here, again, although it's all movable furniture. So we'll probably have some floor outlets here too, because even though it's wireless, generally people need to plug in to recharge. Or if certain things, the bandwidth or the speed is just better over cable than wireless. So there'll be a pretty high density of outlets available in there too.
Is there furniture for just sitting and reading?
Yeah, again, this is all future. The room is wide open now, but we anticipate there'd be some soft seating, some comfortable kind of seating. But remember, it is elementary school. Generally, kids come here in a class. They don't. It's not like high school or that they may be in there on their own. But they may be there after school. They may be there before school. You know, on their own. And in the future, they're all going to have a device or a pad or tablet or something, and need a place to sit down. And
There's two components to the fixed casework, you know, is fixed, it'll be part of the contract. This actually will be bid later on and purchased separately. And that's the 2 components of the FF&E and the technology. Both of them have a budget of $1,200 per student for each one of those, and they'll be bid when we're in construction.
right, and you know,
money
we
is
have
getting
a
spent quick.
program, sort of a generic program that adds up to that $1,200. But like, you know, Peter said, there might be a copier we don't need to buy, we can buy something else. So there's still some variability in how that goes. And the purpose of the FF&E meeting with the staff was, as I said, to sort of confirm the configuration of rooms, the location of doors, you know, some of those kinds of adjacencies and things. So it was productive in that regard, and it did result, as I say, in a few changes there. The other meeting we had last week was with special education too, because that was one element that when we met with teachers back, you know, a month ago now, I guess, there was definitely some discomfort there with the labels that were on the plan at that time and what function was going in what space. So Carol spent some time with her special ed director, Donna Straight, and went over the original narrative and the current programs. And then we all got together and went through the floor plans in a very detailed fashion. And the good news is that we don't need to make the building any bigger. We can satisfy the needs by rearranging some of the labels and what room was going where. And so we produced this chart that basically said, you know, this is what the room was previously labeled as and used as. This is what it's going to be used as. So, and without, as I say, without stealing space from any other program, just using the special ed spaces that were previously identified and making some swaps. And some accommodation and furniture and equipment and casework too anticipated, and utilities. We were able to accommodate the special ed program. And the bottom line there was we believe because the total space occupied by special ed is the same in total, and the spaces being occupied are the same, you know, relative spaces, even though the programs might be a little different. We don't feel we need to resubmit to the Department of Education, that it doesn't constitute that. And we will be resubmitting the program in general to the MSBA as part of the design development submission next month. And, you know, we'll make a statement to that effect, that everything still is consistent with the way it was previously in terms of overall square footage. We can make that statement, so even though some things have swapped internally. So.
I think we all
It's-
think that'll happen, and we hope that'll happen, because we all
Yeah.
know how long it takes Board of Ed to go through and review this. But again, like I said, I think we're all of the opinion that hopefully it's gonna be able to go through
Yeah.
with some minor modifications.
But it was a very productive meeting. I thank Carol and Margaret and all who participated in that. I know it was probably not as easy as it seemed in the end to make this work without, needing extra space here.
No,
That's
that was a
great.
good job.
That's great, thank you. All right.
So,
And-
I think that's that. One other issue I mentioned briefly in as we were passing about the site, extra geotechnical investigation, additional borings and test pits that was authorized a while ago. They were performed, was it just last week?
Last week, yeah.
Yeah, last
2
week.
days, last week, Thursday and Friday.
Pat was there,
Yeah.
and our engineer was there. There was a little dusting of snow on the ground that day, wasn't there?
There was,
I think,
there
but
was a little bit of snow the
didn't
first
bother
day, yeah.
them.
They didn't get a start that morning, they had to come back, they couldn't get the machine there or something, so everything flip-flopped, but it was done by the end of the week. They finished up Friday.
We don't have the final report yet. We got a preliminary information, and I think it's basically good news in that it's sort of consistent with what we anticipated. No major surprises. They took several borings, at key spots, not only in the vicinity of the building, but some, in the vicinity of the parking lot. And this chart here sort of highlights, they gave us the borings and the test pits, and then highlighted the ones they thought were going to be problematic. You can see there's 2 yellow lines. The 2 they highlighted were right at the future front door. There's a pretty good sized cut there. We're lowering the grade at that point about 10 feet, and about 11 feet down is ledge. And so we're lowering the grade 10 feet to get to the floor. Remember that foundations have to go another 4 feet. So we're into ledge at that point. We'll have to do some ledge removal for some extent of that front part of the building right there. The other spot that they highlighted was right here, but we had already anticipated that by pulling back the parking lot here and saying we may well be able to just leave the ledge there because we're lowering the grade there, and as they noted, the high point, or at least where they took the boring, the ledge would end up being 6 feet above the adjacent proposed grade. So either we'd have to blast it to extend that parking lot, or we could just leave it the way we've shown it, which is our preference at this time. Otherwise, the only other thing that was kind of interesting is they took a couple borings in the vicinity of the existing teacher's parking lot, and the top of rock there was in 2 places was down just 2.5 feet, and a couple other places 4.5 feet. So, and it's kind of unusual because the existing school is here. The sewerage comes out of the building now to this corner, then goes across that parking lot to these leaching fields. And so there's a pipe or a couple pipes going through that area where the rock is fairly shallow, right in there. And it's good for us to know because now we may try to avoid that area with any utility lines. We're talking about trying to sheet the water across here, which would be nice. Then we wouldn't have any pipes or catch basins to put in, and we could just pick it up here. If we can do that, we'd avoid that rock too. So that's the
Carl, have you balanced, where are you with cut and fill calcs?
well, in the preliminary, remember we said it was relatively close, but the issue was that one of timing, because the first thing they have to do is do a fair amount of cutting to get to the footprint area, the bottom of footing, and the area that needs fill, unfortunately, is right here mostly. There's a little bit back here too, and those 2 areas they can't fill right away. So they're going to remove material, but they're not going to have any place to put it. So even though we're balanced, it may be kind of a false, deceptive kind of balance. They may have to truck it off site, or they may have to find a stockpile and handle it twice. They can't just move it from a high spot to a low spot.
Is there any wiggle room in there to help you with the ledge, bringing the grades up some?
How do you mean that? Oh, to bring to
Yeah.
avoid the ledge.
To bring your floor elevation up?
We're already filling pretty good back here.
I know.
Every foot we're bringing up, that's a lot of fill back in that corner. That's why, but certainly they'll play with it. Now, we just got this information today,
Yeah.
but they're thinking exactly the same way, Rob. is there any way we can manipulate this to, you know, make any problems go away?
As part of this estimating exercise, both of the estimators will do a calculation to see where we are in the cut and fills.
And
Go
the
from
timing.
there. Yeah.
So does it look like any dynamiting at all?
Oh, there will be some. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
There will be some.
I would imagine, yeah. What this says to me too overall is what we've mentioned before. I think the winning contractor on this, the low bid contractor, is the guy who's got the best site guy. Because there's gonna be a big swing in site pricing on this as to, you know, who can use the material, who knows how to, manipulate it, who's gonna think about, well, maybe I will fill this and do something with the leaching field right away so I can put that material there, and it just lends itself to that. That's one of the, the positive things about competitive bidding like this is that, the winner is gonna be the smartest guy in the sense of being able to handle the site work.
There's a lot of
which is such a big
recycling today.
part
When
of
you,
this.
a lot of the time when you blast the ledge, you recycle it right there and reuse it for on-site gravel. So you're actually utilizing what you're taking out, reclaiming paving, reclaiming, the ledge. So there's a lot of ingenuity, and most of the bigger
My son wants
operations
to
will
light
do
it.
that. I'm sorry?
My son wants to light it.
The
Light it.
dynamite?
I just said to Michelle, how neat would it be to have show and tell on blasting day? I
That'd be
mean, I
better than
realize
just
you
a dry
can't,
day.
Not a good
but
idea to have,
how
even though
nice
it's
would
one of
that
those kids
be?
that dynamite women don't want them around to remember.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously you can't for safety reasons, but wouldn't that be awesome if there was a way of doing it?
As we talked about.
It's an auction item. It's an auction item at the gala, the next gala.
18 little kids in hot hats.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Right? It's a fundraiser.
PTA
$100.
auction, PTA auction,
wants to press
front
the-
row at
Who
the
wants to
blasting
press that?
site.
Can you imagine?
Is
What's the
there-
light the fuse?
Oh,
Is
that would
there
be so awesome.
anything? Is there anything in this? Because you talked about taking soils off site versus keeping them on site. Is there any way, or is there any possibility that we should be thinking of if we can give up a portion of the existing site for storage like
Yes.
that? That would save
Yes.
money.
Yes, they've
Then we
already
should
thought
talk
about
about
that. We've already talked about that, and that might be on the table when the cost estimates come out. If in their opinion, they think it's, being priced more expensively because it's being trucked off, if we could give them a portion of an
Right.
existing site for them to stockpile material over here and then bring it back,
Right.
the following season, it
Actually,
would mean a field is out of commission though.
I know the application for the turf field, the GAA accounted for that possibility of losing some of that existing field for storage.
You're right.
I mean, the best thing that's gonna work
But it's
for
a
you
good
is,
question.
Yeah,
It's a
it
good
is,
question and
yeah.
a good thing to.
Yeah, and we have to think about those things.
if you can provide that flexibility,
You
if you can
still have
provide
to
that
load a
flexibility
truck.
and let them make their
Right.
decision as to what they wanna do.
Right.
Make it available, let them know that if you wanna do it, you can store it, but they may have more ingenious ways of.
Right.
So it might be something that you have to think about, Carol, that, of programmatically, what can we give up on fields for the school for a certain amount of time?
It'll be a giant dirt pile to play in.
King of the Hill.
You still have to load a truck with the material, drive it over to here, dump it,
dynamite.
and come back.
Dirt,
But
log,
may not be that
kids
much
will
different
love
than
it.
driving it off-site to some other place.
You
if
can always
giving
just
up a
leave it in
field
that back
is
area. We
precious.
just fill the whole
Right.
thing in.
Right,
It's
that's
just
what
that
you
if
have to
there's a-
decide.
If there's savings and they can use their heads and think of it, and fine if they
Tim
don't,
Garrity lives behind
then
there.
we don't lose it.
One other thing I want to bring up, it sort of related to that as well as another site item is, when our consultant goes out there, they do sort of locate these points roughly on a plan, but they're in the middle of the woods, they don't have good datum points to reference, and they kind of draw it approximately where it is. Usually what we have done is, when it's crucial, and in a couple of these places it is, we have the surveyor go back out and locate those borings. There's a mark there, a stake or something, they can see where the hole was, and locate those so they can plot them on the survey. We also have down here, you can't quite see it, there is a bit of wetlands in the backyards of these abutters, and as we start to do some of this work here, our consultant realized we need a little bit more information about where that wetland goes, just to make sure that we can confirm how far away we are, and it kind of trailed off on the baseline survey, and it is off the property here, but we'd like to ask, to have the surveyor go back out, pick up that information, and pick up these locations too.
Don't they flag everything within 300 feet?
It might be
Oh.
more than that away, but the engineer just wants to confirm that, George. So that's maybe why it didn't get picked up the first time, is because, you know, that would be the best news. It hits there and then it goes this way, away from the property line. And if they can just confirm that, and there's a little bit more grading information they wanted too, that's right at the property line here, or just over it, to make sure we're not impacting it, that's related to that as well.
That'll be critical for the collecting of the snow
It's part of the
Yeah.
NRAD too.
Yeah.
from plowing.
And so we had hoped to have a formal
plow one
proposal
way.
tonight, but we don't have one from the survey. We just have kind of a telephone estimate, and we relayed it to Pat and Chuck, and I don't know how you guys want to handle it. If we'd rather not have to wait for 2 more weeks to the next committee meeting, if we could get something approved not to exceed.
Yeah, we'd recommend that we pick a number, and we've talked about a number of like $3,500, it's probably gonna be a lot less than that. But just so that when it comes in, we can give them the okay to go with it, because it's gotta be done right away. The sooner we have it, the better.
We'll review the scope of work and review it today with Courtney. And we'll review the proposal we get for this additional survey against the scope of work.
Make a motion
We'll make sure it's
to approve a not to exceed 3,500 for additional survey information.
Second.
All in favor?
And-
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Motion carries.
Okay.
help us move things.
All right, Carl, anything else?
I don't know if you want to talk about future meetings.
List.
Yeah, our next meeting, 2 weeks, February 5th, and like I said, February 19th is our big meeting that we will be voting on the DD submittal to the MSBA. And then after that, Courtney just sent me an email. Looks like we'll be meeting roughly every sometimes 2, but every 3 weeks through August 20th, and then once a month after that, probably the first week of the month, right, so we can approve invoices?
Second week of the month.
Second week of the month.
Okay.
Do you have those dates? Can you?
I do.
We'll
I do.
fine
I
tune
just
those.
don't-
We're
yeah.
trying to time them not only to be every 3 weeks, but also to make sure we hit those milestones of before the 60% submittal, before the 90% submittal, that as soon as we have the cost estimate, we schedule a meeting with you
Right.
before we make the submission to MSBA. So
Right.
we'll make sure there's a meeting on that, you know, in that vicinity, and then work backwards from that
I
roughly.
think
every
Courtney and
3
I
weeks.
today added like 1 or 2 more meetings, so
Yeah.
if you guys can just look at that. and then
We'll-
I'll
we'll
send it out to
fine-tune that and
everybody.
get
That'd
that
be
to you.
great. Yep.
Can I make a suggestion on that, with that meeting on the 19th, maybe a longer meeting that we start at 7 o'clock?
Does that work for everybody? I know some people have a harder time getting here, so that's why we moved to
Do you
7:30
think it's gonna be a lot more
potentially.
time? Is that gonna take a lot more time?
Carl? what do you
Potentially,
think?
yeah. The good news would be if it didn't, you know, if we were on budget and everything's okay, and it would be a nice short meeting. But what is it, plan for the, expect the worst, hope for the best?
Yes.
I know.
Oh,
Yep, I
Yeah,
do,
no,
I
it's
know.
not.
We know it's vacation week.
Yep. So-
While I'm thinking of it though, I'd like to just remind everybody that the next 2 meetings are on the second floor.
So we're definitely going with 7:30 for that meeting?
Right now, that's what we're booked at, just because people have a hard time sometimes getting here for 7, so.
We
After,
will
after
be
that, we
efficient.
will revisit the 7 o'clock time, David, for you. All right. Anything else, Carl? Your Pat?
I have just 2 quick items.
Go ahead.
Just want to talk about real quick the middle high school.
Oh, yeah.
I just passed around a schedule that Chuck did in conjunction with a meeting and a quick discussion that I had with Kyle and Ellie.
Yep.
The gun around?
And I just want to point out what we did basically. MSBA has actually asked us to simply update the latest information we have on where we think we're going to be with the schedule. And what we did is we attempted to build in as much flexibility and move things down the road sufficiently to give you time to do what you have to do, and also be done in conjunction with the completion of the Pembroke. So if you look at the schedule real quick, on the 30th, we talked about there being a board meeting. I just needed confirmation as to who's going to be coming in, so we can let MSBA know who's coming next Wednesday. And
Carol, are
again,
you all set for the, okay.
yeah.
I'll do my best to get there. We'll see
Is this
if I
the one in
schedule.
Boston?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there the
I'd
board
like to
meeting?
go to that one.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to go to that one.
Yeah, and again, like I said, that,
Driving the plow here.
yeah.
Yeah, you may. There may be a snowstorm.
Try parking that thing downtown Boston.
And again, what we have, we've submitted what we had, and what we had is, it's part of a feasibility study, but we're assuming that MSBA is gonna want us to do what they normally ask us to do, and that would be a board meeting to approve the feasibility study, which will be advanced over what we have, and that would allow us to move to schematic design. We see that at the September board meeting, to advance your feasibility study and give Kyle a chance to get the whole thing done. And then, once the schematic design is done and we move that to the final MSBA board approval, that would be in January. And this is all targeted to coincide with your town meeting in the spring. Because after that's approved in January, you have that 120 days to get your money approved. So this would actually allow for the town meeting in May and the ballot approval in the end of May or the middle of May. We'll have to firm up those dates. And then allow the completion of design and then construction to start. And this shows construction starting in March and finishing in September of 15, which is just before Pembroke opens and the high school and middle school are all renovated to accommodate the new occupancy. Now, there is flexibility because some of the work, again, if we're gonna have approval in May of 14, you could get some of it done the first summer, maybe the roof or something like that. So there's a lot of flexibility that we could talk about here. First thing we have to do is obviously get the project approved on next Wednesday, which we anticipate is gonna happen. They will probably at that point tell us how they want us to arrange our relationships with, they've already said that they're gonna probably talk about some kind of a modification of our contract. We think it might end up being a new contract, but we're gonna wait for their marching orders, ask what they're gonna want from you to verify that, and then the ball will start rolling, and we can start moving into the feasibility study and really increase that to a level where everybody understands what has to happen and what you want to happen.
So from,
And I think it's really important you're there if they want to talk contracts.
They're not
They
gonna,
won't,
no,
they
they're
won't
not
do it
gonna.
there?
no.
Okay.
What they'll do at that meeting, they're gonna approve it, and then
And
they'll
then
say,
they'll
we'll
do
have
it
a
after
conference
the
call,
fact.
we'll have a meeting,
Okay.
so they're not gonna
They're
talk
gonna run it
contracts.
probably
Yeah.
like a regular
Yeah.
kickoff meeting and it's. brings it
So this is gonna be like the one I went to, 5 minutes,
You got
you
it.
know? Okay.
Yeah,
They wanna
That's right.
treat this as a separate
but,
project.
but from now on, from now on, our meetings will have updates on the middle high school,
What we're gonna-
along with our scheduled meetings on, Pembroke.
what we're gonna suggest is when we have our meetings, mentioned to Chuck and we agree, that after the 30th, that's gonna be an approved project, it'll be a separate project, we assume. We should have separate minutes, and as part of this meeting, just have a separate
Meeting.
middle high school segment of what's going on in the project and update you on that.
Well, since
So
we
we'll
talked
handle them
about
separately.
that- Since
Yeah.
I talked with Pat, and I talked about that this afternoon, I did some research. Your committee is actually called the Georgetown School Building Committee.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not the Pembroke School.
No.
Committee.
Yeah.
No,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
There's no reason then, as far as we're concerned, and we'll verify this with the authority if they care, I don't think they do, that you just can't make that an agenda item to talk about the middle school, high school. Since you're a school building committee, we have other committees that are school building committees. They talk about all the schools in their district as they go through whether safety concerns or
Yep.
stuff like that. So if that fits within your charters, what the committee is, that's what I'd suggest we do is, although Pat and I talked about running them separate, I'll
Yep.
verify this with the authority. We'll just keep this in as an agenda item to give you these kind of updates. That's-
Yeah, because when I had to fill out who all the members were, it's the same members that are working on the Pembroke project so they have that.
We'll check with them.
So-
But not on the 19th.
Yeah, no,
Are there
Unless
any
we
openings
start-
on this committee?
on what committee?
Any openings?
On this committee? Yes, right now, we're trying to find and work with finance to get a FinCom member back on. Nazreen was kind of filling in, but she has time constraints and.
So that's the only, there's no others?
What about AJ?
Yeah, there's one more.
we don't know that for sure.
No, we got a letter
Mm.
from AJ.
He hasn't officially resigned. He's still a member on this committee.
Okay, well, he did submit a letter that was given to the Board of Selectmen, so,
Oh, that's official.
Oh, you did?
yeah, that, I thought, because where it was on our last agenda, I thought I saw that, I might be crazy, but I
Oh.
saw
Oh,
that
we didn't
letter
hear anything
somewhere.
about that.
I checked with Jan today and she said nothing had been. All
Okay.
right, just get with me on that.
Yeah, because I've seen the letter.
Why,
so.
Peter?
Well,
I've
we're
seen
on
the letter, I
TV,
know
we
that.
should put it out that if we need more members. You know, somebody may wanna, you know, have more to do with the high school, so.
Right. I think we, oh, actually Mike's not here, but I think we have all the, except for finance, that we have to get, you know, we have to work with FinCom, and I'm working with Sandy now. But I'm pretty sure that based on the MSBA guidelines on who we need, like, right now, we are at least filling all those requirements, so.
Yeah, there'd have to be a specific discipline, I guess.
It would, right.
Because AJ was more of a building
He was
type.
construction.
Construction, so it has to be somebody in that field.
Or his title was, just a resident.
Yeah, he was just resident.
Yeah.
Well, but there,
Clearly meet their
it
requirements.
was also.
Right, we do
We-
meet,
we
and by
list,
not filling
you
another
know,
position, it
things
means
that they have
we don't need
expertise
as
in.
many
Yeah,
people
definitely should have been
to fill a
announced that.
quorum.
Except for finance.
All right. I'd like, anything else? No? I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. See you in 2 weeks. We have a week off.